The auditorium was filled with excitement, but amidst the applause and cheers, one student sat quietly, trying to shrink into their seat. Around them, whispers from a group of bullies echoed. Eyes darted nervously as the student clenched their fists, fighting back tears. It was hard to ignore the way their shoulders hunched, trying to hide the pain. But then, something unexpected happened. Emma Watson, in the middle of her speech, noticed the situation. Without missing a beat, she paused, her gaze locking onto the student. The crowd fell silent as Emma stepped off the stage, walking straight toward the student. The room held its breath, waiting for what would happen next. This was no ordinary moment. What followed was a reminder of how simple acts of kindness can change everything. Emma Watson, known for her advocacy and commitment to social issues, was at this event to speak about the importance of standing up for others. As the applause died down, she noticed a young student in the crowd, someone who wasn't cheering or clapping along like everyone else. The student sat alone, eyes downcast, as a group of classmates nearby exchanged cruel whispers. Emma had spent years speaking out against injustice, and she knew this was a moment she couldn't ignore. The student, someone Emma would later find out was named Sophie, had been struggling with bullying for months. It wasn't the first time Sophie had faced ridicule in school, but this time it felt different. Emma could see it in her eyes, the defeat. But what made this moment even more powerful wasn't just the bullying Sophie was enduring. It was the fact that Emma had once been in her shoes. Emma had faced her own challenges with bullying growing up, and she understood the toll it took on a person's confidence and self-worth. With a determined glance, Emma made her decision. She wasn't going to let this moment pass without doing something. As Emma continued speaking, her eyes kept drifting back to Sophie. The whispers in the crowd grew louder, the laughter more pointed. Sophie's shoulders tensed with every word spoken behind her, the weight of the taunts sinking deeper. Her face flushed red, not from embarrassment, but from the sting of repeated cruelty. The bullies weren't even trying to be discreet anymore. Sophie tried to sink further into her seat, hoping the attention would fade, but it only grew louder. Her eyes welled up with tears as she bit her lip, trying desperately to hold it together. Emma noticed. She saw the signs of distress. The way Sophie's hands gripped the seat in front of her, the way her chest rose and fell quickly as if trying to fight off the panic. And that was all Emma needed to see. Without hesitation, she stopped mid-sentence. The entire room seemed to hold its breath as Emma calmly set the microphone down, took a few steps off the stage, and walked directly toward Sophie. "Hey," Emma said, her voice gentle yet firm. "Are you okay?" The room fell into an uneasy silence. Everyone waited, wondering what Emma would do next. Sophie looked up, her face a mixture of surprise and hesitation. But Emma smiled warmly, a smile that somehow made everything feel a little safer, a little less frightening. Emma knelt down beside Sophie, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. The world around them seemed to fade as Emma looked directly into Sophie's eyes. No one in the room moved. The bullies had fallen silent, and the crowd seemed to collectively hold its breath. Sophie, still shocked by Emma's sudden attention, blinked a few times before speaking. Her voice was shaky, but she managed to whisper, "It's nothing, just ignore them." Emma shook her head softly, her expression unwavering. "I see you," she said, her voice calm but firm, "and I won't ignore this." For a moment, Sophie just stared at Emma, unsure of what to do with the sudden kindness. But there was something in Emma's eyes, a strength, a reassurance, that made Sophie feel safe. She let out a small breath, her trembling hands finally loosening their grip on the seat. "You're not alone in this," Emma continued, speaking directly to Sophie and in a way, to everyone in the room. "Bullying is never okay, and you don't have to carry that burden by yourself." The bullies, now visibly uncomfortable, shifted in their seats, avoiding Emma's gaze. The atmosphere in the room had shifted dramatically. What had been a scene of cruelty moments before was now filled with understanding, compassion, and a call to action. Emma took a step back and motioned for Sophie to join her. Sophie hesitated at first, glancing at the crowd, her cheeks flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and uncertainty. But then, with a deep breath, she stood up and followed Emma off to the side, away from the crowd's watchful eyes. The two of them sat down in a quieter corner of the room. The whispers from earlier had died down, replaced with a hushed murmur as everyone awaited what would happen next. Emma smiled softly, her voice low but full of sincerity. "I know what it feels like to be made to feel small, to feel like no one notices or cares. But I promise you, you are not invisible." Sophie's lip quivered as she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. It's been so hard. Every day at school, the teasing, I just don't know how to handle it anymore. I try to be strong, but it's hard." Emma nodded, her eyes filled with empathy. "I hear you. I've been there too. I've faced my own battles with bullying. But here's the thing. You are not what they say about you. You are so much more than that." Sophie's eyes welled up as she looked at Emma. "But they make me feel so worthless. I don't know how to fight back." Emma gently placed a hand on Sophie's, offering reassurance. "You don't have to fight back with words or violence. The best thing you can do is stand tall, be kind to yourself, and know that what they say doesn't define you. People who hurt others are often dealing with their own pain. You don't have to carry their negativity with you." Sophie's breath slowed, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to relax, feeling the weight of her emotional burden lift, even if just a little. "You're stronger than you think, Sophie," Emma continued. "I know this is hard, but you can get through it. And don't be afraid to speak up. There's always someone who will listen." Sophie nodded, her heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and newfound hope. Emma's words weren't just a temporary comfort. They were a reminder that kindness, even in the face of cruelty, had the power to change lives. As Emma and Sophie stood up, the crowd seemed to shift around them. The atmosphere had completely changed. What had once been tense and uncomfortable was now filled with a quiet, collective understanding. Emma's presence had done more than just offer comfort to Sophie. It had opened a door for others to step through as well. Sophie, her shoulders a little straighter and her heart a little lighter, turned to face the crowd. The bullies, who had moments ago been laughing and whispering, now found themselves shifting uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding eye contact with the two of them. Emma addressed the audience, her voice calm yet powerful. "We all have a responsibility to lift each other up, not tear each other down." Sophie just took a huge step, and I hope we can all do the same in our own lives. A ripple of applause spread through the room, hesitant at first but growing louder, as people began to feel the weight of Emma's words. Sophie stood a little taller now, a small but genuine smile spreading across her face as she realized that she wasn't alone. The bullies, now clearly regretful, looked down at their feet, their earlier bravado fading into awkward silence. Emma caught their gaze for a brief moment, her expression not one of anger, but of quiet disappointment. There was no need to say anything more. The message had been made loud and clear. One of Sophie's classmates, who had been a silent bystander until now, approached her with a smile. "Hey, Sophie," they said softly. "I'm sorry about what happened. If you ever want to talk or need someone to hang with, I'm here." Sophie blinked in surprise but then smiled, a real smile this time. "Thanks, that means a lot." Emma watched the exchange, a sense of quiet pride settling over her. Sometimes, all it took was one act of kindness to change the entire narrative. As the event continued, the energy in the room was completely transformed. The awkward silence that once hung in the air was replaced by a sense of unity. Sophie's story was no longer just about one student's struggle. It had become a moment for everyone in the room to reflect on how their actions, big or small, could affect those around them. By the end of the event, several people came up to Emma and Sophie, offering words of support. It was clear that Emma's simple act of stepping in had inspired others to rethink their behavior and the way they treated those around them. The bullies, no longer so bold, were now quietly reflecting on their actions, their earlier confidence replaced with a humility that hadn't been there before. One of the teachers, who had witnessed everything from the side, approached Emma with gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you for showing us all how to be better," she said. "You inspired not just Sophie, but all of us." Emma nodded, her smile soft but genuine. "It's not about me," she replied. "It's about all of us coming together to make sure no one feels like they're invisible. Every small act of kindness matters." Meanwhile, Sophie, her eyes sparkling with a newfound sense of confidence, turned to her classmates. "Thank you all for standing up for me today. I didn't think anyone cared." Her words struck a chord, and one by one, her classmates began to apologize for their past behavior. It was a powerful reminder that change doesn't always happen in grand gestures. It can happen in the quiet moments, the ones that no one expects. As the event wrapped up, Emma shared one last piece of advice with the group. Be the change you want to see. You never know how your words and actions can impact someone else's life. And with that, Sophie walked out of the event not as the bullied student, but as someone who had found her voice, her strength, and a sense of belonging in a world that had once made her feel small. As the event came to an end, the lingering warmth from the day's powerful exchange didn't dissipate quickly. The conversations continued in hushed tones, but now they were filled with genuine compassion and understanding. People were no longer focused on the events themselves, but on how they could take the lessons learned into their own lives. Sophie, now walking beside Emma as the crowd slowly dispersed, felt lighter, freer. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so empowered. The heaviness that had once weighed on her chest had lifted, and in its place was a new sense of possibility. Emma's words echoed in her mind. "You are not invisible." As they made their way to the exit, Sophie turned to Emma, her voice full of gratitude. I don't even know how to thank you. You didn't have to do that. You could have just kept talking like everyone else." Emma smiled softly, her eyes twinkling with kindness. "Sometimes, it only takes one person to notice, one person to care, and that's enough to make a difference. You already have everything you need to be strong, Sophie. You just have to believe in yourself." Sophie nodded, feeling the weight of Emma's words settle into her heart. For the first time in a long while, she felt hopeful about her future. She knew there would still be hard days ahead, but now she had the courage to face them. Back at school, the ripple effect of Emma's intervention began to spread. Students who had been passive bystanders now knew that they had the power to speak up. Those who had been bullies began to reconsider their actions. And the most important change, Sophie no longer saw herself as a victim. She saw herself as a survivor, someone who could stand tall in the face of adversity. Emma's words weren't just a one-time pep talk. They were a call to action for everyone in that room to be better, kinder, and more compassionate. Sophie wasn't the only one who had been impacted by the day's events. Everyone who witnessed it walked away with a little more empathy, a little more understanding of the power they held to make a difference. As the dust settled and life slowly returned to normal, the message that Emma had shared continued to echo through the community. Students who had witnessed Sophie's story were now more aware of how their actions could impact others. Teachers, inspired by the bravery they had seen, began to take a more proactive stance against bullying in their schools. The impact of that one act of kindness reached far beyond the event. It sparked something in the hearts of those who had been there. People began to reach out to one another more, offering support, speaking out against injustice, and fostering a community where empathy and kindness were the standard, not the exception. Sophie, now a symbol of resilience, began to share her story. She spoke at school assemblies, telling others how one moment of understanding had changed her life. Her message wasn't one of revenge or bitterness. It was about healing, growth, and the importance of lifting each other up. At the next event Emma attended, she was asked about the incident with Sophie. She spoke softly but with conviction. We all have the power to make a difference in someone's life. It doesn't take a celebrity or a big gesture. It just takes a moment of connection, a willingness to listen, and the courage to act. Sophie, sitting in the audience, couldn't help but smile as she heard Emma's words. She knew that it wasn't just her life that had changed. It was everyone's life who had witnessed the power of kindness in action. And in that moment, Sophie knew that she wasn't just a victim of bullying. She was a warrior, a survivor, and most importantly, she was part of a larger movement that could change the world. As the video drew to a close, the message was clear. No act of kindness is ever too small. It takes just one person to spark a ripple effect that can heal, inspire, and bring people together. In a world that often feels divided, it's moments like these that remind us of the power of human connection.